are going to talk about fostering resilience after brain injury. My name is Holli Striegel. I am a social worker at Unity Point St. Luke's Hospital in Cedar Rapids. Previously, I worked with Brain Injury Alliance as a neuroresource facilitator. As Lisa mentioned earlier, please feel free to ask questions throughout. If you ask questions in the chat box, I'm hoping Lisa might be able to kind of keep track of those because I don't know if I can see all of them. So, but we'll go ahead and get started. The objectives today are to really talk about what is resilience in relation to brain injury. This is kind of a new topic in the area of research, and I'm hearing it more and more. So we'll talk about what that is exactly as it relates to brain injury. I also want to talk about strains and gains following brain injury as a survivor, but also for family members and caregivers, and just talk about how to move towards more of that gains perspective. We'll also talk about specific positive techniques and coping strategies that can help promote resiliency and finding a meaning after a life-altering event such as brain injury. So obviously, brain injury affects everyone very differently. It can alter someone's personality, it affects them physically, mentally, behaviorally, emotionally. We know this, you see this every day, you deal with this every day. But despite those challenges and changes that occur after brain injury, survivors and their families adapt. Survivors and their families continue to lead meaningful, productive lives after a life-altering event. People are by nature resilient. People are by nature adaptable. But some people do it better than others. And resilience comes easier to some people than others do. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. But I do want to make the note that naturally people are resilient. Talk about how to, really harness those qualities. But naturally people do have these abilities. So why does this matter? Why are we talking about this today? Why do we care about the topic of resilience? Like I mentioned, it's a relatively new topic in the area of research, but the research that has been done suggests that the concept of resilience is actually protective against negative outcomes and even facilitates adaptation and adjustment after major life events such as a brain injury. Resilience is one of the main trajectories of psychological adjustments following brain injury. And individuals with higher resilience during recovery from brain injury report significantly fewer symptoms, a better quality of life, and better functional outcomes. So to me, that's a big deal. That's something that I want to know more about. If there truly is one concept that can affect someone's life for the better that much, that's a concept worth knowing about. And it's definitely worth sharing with you all and encouraging you to not only listen to this presentation, but to keep an eye out on this topic for years to come, because it is a new area of research and more information is going to be gathered, and I think you're going to be hearing this topic more and more. With that said, let's go ahead and dig in. So what is resilience? By definition, resilience is commonly described as personal qualities and skills that enable a person to adapt well in the face of trauma or adversity. Specifically, research has focused on certain qualities held by people that they would consider to be persons of high resilience. They're looking at qualities that help people bounce back, that help people effectively cope when they're facing challenges and changes. Such individual qualities include the ones listed here, but certainly aren't limited to these. Self-esteem, self-efficiency, subjective well-being, optimism, faith, self-determination, ability to adapt, and goal orientation. Most often, people who present with these qualities naturally have very secure and positive relationships. They also have some sense of control, and they're able to accept changes. We're going to talk about all of these qualities and really how to harness these qualities and values to improve your resilience. But I do think it's also important to talk about what resilience is not and the qualities that one should avoid when they're really searching to be truly resilient. So what is not resilience? Obviously, brain injury is a life-altering event. It's a big deal. It's very traumatic. It can have huge consequences on everyday life, family matters. The list goes on and on. But you're not a victim. Accidents happen in life. Bad things, unfortunately, happen to good people. The world is not out to get you. It is okay to be angry and asking, why did this happen to me, or why did this happen to my loved one? That is a totally normal grief reaction. It's a totally normal part of grieving. But in order to get through that grief and avoid landing in depression and a world of pessimism, and to avoid learned helplessness, which is the opposite of resilience, you really need to move past those negative feelings and those negative thoughts. You really need to find a way to harness the qualities we mentioned before, the positive self-esteem, optimism, and so on, and to move past these negative qualities, and just decide that you are not helpless, that you are not going to take on the qualities of a person who is helpless. It sounds very simple, and obviously it is not just this simple, but miserable people focus on things that they hate about their life, and happy people focus on things that they love about their life. It's certainly not that simple, but in many ways it is about your frame of mind. So this information about what resilience is and what it's not can definitely be utilized right from the get-go following a brain injury. It can certainly be useful in brain injury rehabilitation. Not everyone is naturally resilient. I do believe that everyone is naturally resilient, but they may not have a high level of resilience naturally. Not everyone feels supported. Not everyone has great, strong, positive relationships and connections. Not everyone feels accepting of stuff every single day, and not everyone's optimistic every single day. That is totally understandable. But again, it's about harnessing this information and doing something with it. So from a brain injury rehab perspective, traditionally rehabilitation focuses on identifying and reducing impairments. The goal is to work to improve daily functioning, and this is incredibly important to improve daily life and essentially quality of life after brain injury. But I don't think we should stop there. I think it's just as important to improve someone's resiliency. It is recommended that patients find really meaningful and valued activities as part of their rehab, instead of kind of where traditionally rehab focuses on the problems. We really need to shift away from problem-focused narratives and to really try to focus on a strengths-based approach and focus on the things that are working well and on the things that you have going for you that are going to help you improve your quality of life, rather than focusing on everything that is more difficult and everything that is different. So obviously easier said than done. So how do we do that? First of all, I think it's important to address the concept of resilience with individuals and families. Make them aware of this mindset. Normalize the emotional responses and maximize the emotional conversations. And don't just do this with brain injury survivors, but do it with the family members, do it with the friends, do it to everyone who is integral in the rehab for that individual. Helping the individual and family to understand these concepts but also to focus on post-injury gains rather than comparing post-injury functioning to pre-injury functioning can really help with the idea of resilience and that mindset of being positive and optimistic. It's also really important to define goals and successes differently. And by that, I mean survivors and their family members absolutely have to be involved in goal planning. What the goals are need to come from them. They have to be goals that matter to them. And you need to recognize the successes on a daily basis. The smallest successes need to be recognized, because otherwise trying to be optimistic and trying to be positive all the time becomes really difficult without any support and without any motivation. So all of these things are important not only for rehab, but beyond rehab. And these are some of the qualities that I really want to focus on and talk more about tonight. How to grow from this event, how to utilize social support, and why is it so important? Having a sense of control in a situation where so many people feel like they have no control, to find a sense of control in order to avoid that learned helplessness that I mentioned. And really just to try to find meaning out of something really terrible that happened. So with growth, finding meaning in the trauma that you and your family have experienced can lead to a much happier life. Finding meaning and personal growth is not only possible, but it is fairly common after brain injury. Everyone finds their meaning differently. Some people write a book about their story, or maybe they start a support group or an online blog, or in some way present their stories to others in order to help in some way. So whether that's educating people on brain injury and how brain injury can affect life, or educating other caregivers as a caregiver as to what to experience, what resources are out there in order to make meaning of the negative things that you had to go through, and maybe help the next person go through things a little less negatively, to have a little bit more support there. It could be something as simple as promoting helmet safety. If you had a bike injury and that's how you acquired your brain injury, maybe you find meaning in promoting bicycle helmets for others. Or maybe you just find a way to tell your story just because simply telling your story out loud brings you some peace. That is also personal growth. Family members may find meaning in caring for their injured loved one. Caregivers are so resilient in so many ways. One example is sustainability, which I wanted to point out here. In this case, sustainability, I mean, is the action of people who sustain functionality despite stress and adversity. They're the rock. They hold things together despite the fact that things are really hard and things are really changing, and roles in that family are changing, dynamics of that family are changing, but they're still finding a sense of growth by being that rock, by being that caregiver. Caregivers and survivors alike who are able to exemplify sustainability typically find their strength by maintaining a sense of meaning and purpose. They focus on meaningful, goal-directed activities, and they continue to connect with others and build on strengths, not weaknesses. So again, recognizing those gains, as small as they are, and not focusing on the strains can make a really big difference in your mindset and can add a lot of motivation in a really difficult time. And of course, this is not a perfect equation. There are definitely bad days. There will be strains along with the gains. While there might be many, many strains, there are equal gains. They just might be a little harder to find, a little more difficult to point out. But some folks look at growth after injury as an opportunity to do something they weren't able to do before. So maybe instead of working 60 hours a week, they're now able to spend some time volunteering for a cause that really matters to them, or just simply being able to spend more time with family. May not be in the way that you imagined it prior to your injury, but that still is a positive that can be found. We really all have a choice to look at the glass half empty or half full. And like I said, some days are better than others, and no matter what, that glass is going to be half empty on some days. And some days you're just going to be mad and you're going to be pessimistic, and that's okay. And that's very normal. But I think it's a good goal to try to have more good days than bad, and to try to have more days where you find meaning, and when you find those gains, and where you can recognize all of the good things in your life, and not just the challenges. Social support is really, really huge in the concept of resilience. It's no surprise to me at all that strong relationships play a huge role in resiliency. Survivors who have true engagement from social supports have much better outcomes in recovery. This is referring to existing positive relationships, but also to support beyond those traditional relationships, whether that's connecting with support groups, meeting other people with brain injuries, with similar stories, with similar backgrounds, or just accepting some type of professional help. Just accepting help from others, regardless of who that person is, improves outcomes. Children who sustain brain injury have significantly better outcomes when their parents specifically are actively involved. Caregivers are also more successful when they feel supported. And I want to make the point that these people, whether survivor, family member, caregiver, doesn't matter. They need to feel supported, not just the support is there. They need to actually feel supported in order to continually be able to wake up and be optimistic and be motivated. After any traumatic event, people tend to rally together. That is when you see the most social support. Neighbors bring over meals when you get home from the hospital, and family and friends kind of come out of the woodwork to help. And this is also the time where you get the most professional support as well, when you're in the hospital, when you're getting set up for other programs, to engage back into the community. You have a lot of professional support going on there too at that time. But over time, that support kind of becomes less and less. Whether that's because insurance decides you're ready to go home, and that just means having less professional support easily accessible, or family and friends who aren't there every day just kind of assume that you're doing well and that you don't need anything, and that you'll just ask if you need something, which is definitely not the case. Lack of social support can be a really big problem after brain injury. I know when I worked with folks at the Brain Injury Alliance, but also when I work with families in the hospital, social support is a really big problem. Isolation happens really frequently. And I don't think there's one solution to this, one way to combat this. Professionals should certainly empower family members and friends to engage with the survivor. And family members and friends should do the same to engage, empower other folks. I think with brain injury being an often invisible injury, it is very misunderstood. The fallout from social circles really happens because of a lack of knowledge. People don't understand brain injury, they just don't know it, and people are scared about things that they don't know. They don't know how to deal with the new normal. They don't know how to deal with this new personality. So they need to be taught, they need to be educated, they need to get the information. Professionals can help with that, but so can the family members and friends that are close and that do understand. And certainly survivors themselves. Definitely educate your family and friends in order to make them feel more comfortable and to understand what's going on. It's also important for, professionals working in the community to help folks engage more. And by engaging more, I mean by doing things that they really, really want to do. Promoting recreational activities is great, but if they don't have a personal meaning to the individual, it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, don't go bowling. Don't take someone bowling who doesn't want to go bowling, right? I mean, you need to take the time to understand what that person really likes, what matters to them, what do they value, and then get them to engage in that specific activity. Sorry, there we go. It wasn't letting me click. Sense of control. Now, again, I think this is kind of ironic. How is anyone supposed to feel in control in this situation? You had no control over the brain injury itself happening. You have very little control on how the brain injury affects your life. But in a time that you feel like you're so out of control, it is important to find things that you can control. This is a big part of resiliency, to have some type of sense of control over your situation. One thing that I can think of that you do have control over in this situation is, learning as much as you possibly can. Knowledge is power. Families and survivors who have information about brain injury, who have the available resources, are way more likely to feel confident and competent in order to, go back into their community, to re-engage with their community. Families are going to feel more supported if they have the resources and they have knowledge about brain injury. It does provide some control in a situation where people often feel completely powerless. Another example is goal setting. As I mentioned earlier, it's very important for survivors and family members to be involved in setting, but also sharing goals for one another, and to really foster a better communication with one another to ultimately build motivation and resilience. Excuse me. Day-to-day choices. There are always choices that you get to make in life, and even if they're little, recognizing them does help give you a little more sense of control. And I'm also going to throw, out there to, learning something new every day can also give you a sense of control. So maybe being overwhelmed with resources and information as you leave the hospital might not be the time to try to absorb all that information. But if you learn one new thing each day, whether it has anything to do with brain injury or not, I think that certainly helps someone have a sense of control and build motivation. And then how do you continue to find meaning? Everyone has different aspects of life that they find to be the most meaningful, but often they're strongly related to interests, beliefs, values. A sense of spirituality has been linked to a greater sense of self-satisfaction. Activities and goals should be created with these things in mind. Like I said, you need to understand the individual to understand the family member. It's very important to know what matters to you. And as a caregiver yourself, or as a survivor yourself, check in with yourself. What are the things that really drive you? What are your beliefs and values deep down? What are you passionate about? What is worth struggling for? I read an article recently, and I can't think of the name of it now, but I think it was on an NPR, and it was about, trying to figure out what people want in life. People always ask, what do you want in life? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? But the real question that we should be asking is, what are you willing to struggle for? because that is how you find what really matters to you and where your passions truly lie. So if you're having a hard time figuring that out, I would ask you that. What in life is worth struggling for? I guess I'm gonna stop just for a moment and see, Lisa, does anyone have any questions so far? You know, we went through a lot of different qualities and talking about the research, and I want to get into more very practical ways that you can apply this to your daily life. But if anyone has any questions at this point, I would be happy to answer them.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything right as of now. If somebody wants to put something in,
Okay,
not seeing.
well,
I've been kind of watching it, so I haven't seen anything come up yet.
no problem. With our time, I will keep going, but feel free, like I said, to go ahead and ask questions if anything does come up, folks. Um, but we'll go ahead and, you know, so with that information, what do you do with it? Um, I think that there are a couple other things that need to be considered first. Recognizing your past experiences. So if you have had a, say you're a caregiver now, if you've had past caregiving experiences before, say with a parent caring for a parent or caring for children, how you handled that situation is definitely going to um, affect how you handle being a caregiver now. Same thing with the idea of resilience. If you've had a trying time in your life before, a tragic event, or just a huge change in your life, think about how you dealt with that. If you were able to deal with that change with concern and caring, and you were able to ask questions and ask for help, um, that is going to positively affect how you deal with that experience now. If you met challenges with anger and hostility, it might be a little harder for you to work resilient techniques and qualities into your life, but it's important to kind of reflect on that and to think about those experiences and how they might affect your experience now. It is also important to face grief and loss. After a brain injury, there are a lot of losses. Folks face a loss of self, um, a lot of grief, as I mentioned earlier, you know, why did this happen? And I could go into a whole nother hour on that information, but just recognize the grief and loss that you feel, recognize it so you don't end up in a depressed state. I think you really need to deal with those issues, to recognize those issues before you can really move to a resilient state. Recognize that the qualities of resiliency can be applied all across life, not just anything that has to do with the brain injury, but you know, anything that you're unhappy with or any change in your life or challenge that you face. These can be applied to any of those areas. And if you really truly want to foster resilience and make it a part of your life, I think it's important to apply it to all areas of your life and not just being a survivor, being a caregiver, being a loved one. Motivational interviewing is a topic that I want to kind of briefly touch on. I will be getting into more of this information in more detail at the Brain Injury Conference coming up in Des Moines in March if you are interested in this. But this is a technique that might be able to help on those days that you are really struggling, where you're not finding that resilient part of you, or you just need a little extra help fostering that resilient part of you. Motivational interviewing is a technique that looks at past experiences to remind you that you can do this and what are the qualities you used to do it before. So these are just a couple questions, a couple examples. You know, think about another time that you were successful despite a lot of stress or despite a huge change or challenge. What made you successful? What personal qualities helped you to be successful? Reflecting on this, thinking about this, really taking the time to do this can really, really impact how you deal with new challenges as they present themselves. It also helps you recognize your values and your passions, the things that I mentioned before, your beliefs. Um, you know, think about um, think about those things. What provides you with a meaning in life? What makes a life experience meaningful to you? That can help harness those qualities for you as well. A really, really big one right there in the middle that I want to point out is what do you need to feel supported right now? I think everyone can use that question. Everyone all across the board, brain injury or not, survivor, caregiver, professional, I don't care who you are. If you ask yourself that, you are going to be much, much more effective in telling your loved ones what you need, telling your coworker what you need, telling anybody in your life what you need. Um, think about that. What do you need to feel supported right now? Don't think about, you did this wrong, you did this to make me mad. Try your best to reframe that conversation with yourself and to really think, what do I need to feel supported right now? So what else? I'm going to kind of go through some of this more quickly because I really want to talk specifically about techniques that you can use um, in order to really harness resilience. This, again, is part of finding the silver linings. This technique is very similar to motivational and interviewing. Again, thinking about a past struggle or hardship that you had. What caused it? Who was involved? What emotions and feelings did it create? What was the end result? And what happened to you as a result? And that, again, is trying to remind you and to create some motivation that you can do this. And how did you do it before? Even if this challenge is way bigger than the last challenge, you will still find qualities that compare. There will always be strains and there will always be bad days, but there's no point in focusing on the strains. When you focus on the strains, that's how people end up with caregiver burden, how they end up with high stress levels, depression, and family problems. Learning to be grateful is really, really important. I like this little Charlie Brown picture. No matter how hard life can be, go to bed grateful that you have one. Being grateful is a very interesting mindset and very important, and definitely helps foster resilience. Sharing your gratitude with someone is not just for Thanksgiving. I know many families sit around the table on Thanksgiving and say one thing that they're grateful for, and I think that that's something that every family should do way more often than that. Verbally and telling someone just one thing that you are grateful for can make you have such a more positive mindset. Being grateful is just a very, very powerful thing. One thing that you can do, and one very specific thing that I'm going to suggest to you right now in order to learn to be more resilient and more grateful in your life, each week, write down 3 to 5 things that you are grateful for. 3 to 5 things that you are grateful for each week. Write them down. Keep them to yourself or share them. It does not matter. You will see physical and mental improvement. There is actually a lot of research behind that, and I would be very surprised if you tried this and did not feel better by doing so. I kind of skip over a few of these. Again, the main message here with the strains versus gains is to focus on the gains, regardless of the strains. Recognize personal accomplishments. Tell someone that they're doing a good job, that they are meeting their goal. Recognize new relationships and the importance of those, as well as your past relationships. I'm going to just kind of go through here. Again, people are very naturally resilient. They're naturally adaptable, but there is a way that you can harness those to really make that a part of your everyday life. Finding the positives is really hard sometimes, and you're going to have some days where you just don't do it. But, once you resolve the crisis, and that could be anything, not just the event of the brain injury happening, but you're going to have things that come up constantly, whether that is, having a bit of a meltdown, from stress, or whether it is, something completely unrelated, problems at work. Things are going to come up. And once you resolve the crisis, look deeply into who you are, who your family is, what really matters. Again, those values and beliefs, the things that you're passionate about. And again, address the grief and loss, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I know I have heard from people before that sometimes asking for help or knowing what to ask for is actually more of a burden. So this is just one example here I wanted to share with you all. Lotsofhelpinghands.com is a blog where you can, it actually is like a calendar where people can come and sign up for what they're going to help with, whether it's making meals that day, coming over and, doing laundry and helping you out for an hour that day, or whatever it is. There are things out there that would make asking for help a little bit easier. I know this is easier said than done, but do your best to get sleep and to eat balanced meals and to exercise. Research shows that exercise does increase resiliency and quality of life among, a multitude of other health benefits. Drinking lots of water. If you've heard me speak before, this is something I always mention, but I think it's important. The body naturally becomes dehydrated when it's under stress. And being dehydrated can affect you in so many other ways. It's such a simple thing that you can do that can make you feel so much better. Listen to your body and be aware of your feelings. Share your feelings with someone. Whether that's being able to share one thing that you're grateful for with a loved one, or if you want to take this to a different level and really, really work on your resiliency and how to foster that, working with a really skilled therapist would really be a benefit, or a life coach. On a more smaller level, waking up every day with a mantra. I always think of the one from the Saturday Night Live skit from years ago, where I am good enough, I am smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. Those mantras really do help people. So does, meditation, relaxed breathing, taking just a few minutes in the morning, whether it's to verbally say some type of mantra, or just taking a few minutes to meditate and relax and to think of something that you're grateful for. That can have a huge impact on you mentally and physically as well. Just a few other ideas. Definitely staying connected, whether with a support group or natural supports. Partake in journal writing, crafts, whatever it is that you're passionate about, that you value in life. Really take the time to do those things, even if it's for 5 minutes every week. I don't care. Spending any amount of time is going to be so helpful mentally and physically. Do your best to find a purpose in everything. And I also want to add, do your best to try to learn something new every day. I think that definitely helps with resiliency as well. And just a few last minute things to remember. Many positives can be found in many unexpected places. Balance is the key to life. And you can always control your frame of mind, even if you cannot control everything else. Now, obviously, this quote is a little bit of a joke, but it still makes me smile. Awesome things will happen today if you choose not to be a miserable cow. And just a few last things on resilience. Remember that you are good enough. Remember that everyone is different. Stop comparing yourself. Stop comparing yourself to other people. Stop comparing your post-injury self to your pre-injury self. Nothing positive is going to come out of that. Individuality rocks. Learn something new daily. Involve yourself in something that you love doing. Enjoy things that make you happy. Not everyone can be first, second, or third, and that is okay. Care about yourself and others. You do matter. Expect that some days won't be great. and I would be more than happy to answer any questions that folks have. If you would rather send me your questions privately, this is my email that I'm going to leave up. Please feel free to contact me um, anytime about anything that you would like to. If you have questions or if you want more information about a specific topic, I'm more than happy to do that. But thank you everyone so much for your time. Sorry about those technical problems. Apparently it was my computer that it didn't like very much. Also, if you guys want copies of the presentation, certainly contact me, or also Lisa has a copy of it as well, so she can send it to you as well. So, but I'll see if anyone has any questions right now.
I don't see any. If anybody does, please just type them into the chat box real quick, but I'm not seeing anything.
All right.
But yeah, thanks so much, Holly, for all the great information. And again, yeah, sorry about the technical difficulties. I appreciate everybody's patience. And thanks for attending our webinar this evening. And as a reminder, we'll have this archived on our website at biaia.org in the following days. And please fill out the survey you will receive when your certificate of attendance is emailed to you. So thanks again for your attendance and have a great evening. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Holly.
Thank you.